Hi, and welcome back to Leia's Library. Find yourself a cozy corner, get yourself something cozy to drink, and let's get started. Today we are doing our April wrap-up, so all of the books that I read in the month of April of 2023. Let's get into it. The first book that I finished in April was Thistlefoot by GennaRose Nethercott, which is an adult magical realism. This is the story of two estranged siblings, Bellatine, I think is how you pronounce that, and Isaac Yaga, who are reunited when they inherit a mysterious, strange house that walks around onto chicken legs that seems to be tied to their past somehow. What they don't know is that someone else is also looking for the house, a mysterious shadow of the past known only as the Long Shadow Man. So this book actually took me quite a while to get into initially. Maybe I just wasn't in the right headspace for it. But the beginning and most of the middle really dragged for me. But I think the story that it's telling is overall worth it. And maybe if I'd been in a different state of mind, it wouldn't have dragged for me. Because I really do think the story is important. It's sort of a magical realism take on generational trauma that I think is very moving. Especially when you get to the last third of the book. There's a lot in the last third that was really effective. I liked the characters and the plot. I just felt like it could have been a bit more streamlined. But if I ever reread it in the future, I might think differently. The one thing I actually didn't like was the romance between Bellatine and... Oh, is that a spoiler? The romance that Bellatine has. I'll leave it at that. I didn't like it. It felt too much like a Born Sexy Yesterday situation. And I am not a fan of those at all. They give me severe ick. Especially because the way Bellatine is written, for a good half of the book, probably more, I thought she was in her like early 30s, and then her love interest is like 18 or 19, I think, 20 at the earliest, at the oldest. So when Bellatine, who I thought was in her 30s, started showing romantic inklings towards this 18 or 19-year-old, I was so uncomfortable. But then it states that she's actually in her early 20s. So that did make it a little better in terms of the age gap, but still the dynamic they had made me uncomfortable. It was really weird to me because their relationship was giving me more mother-daughter vibes because of the situation. Bellatine effectively has to teach her like a bunch of kind of basic tasks, like how to take care of herself and stuff. So it was a very weird dynamic when there was suddenly sexual tension between them. I was so... Whoa. How did we get here? So yeah, other than that, I did really enjoy it. There are some other characters that I find superfluous. I can't remember her name, but Isaac's love interest. This story just didn't need love interest, I think is ultimately what I'm trying to say. Didn't need love interest, but they were there anyway. Yeah, you gotta have them, I guess. But other than the love interests, I did really like the generational trauma and a family coming together again. I liked those aspects. So I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Victory City by Salman Rushdie, which is a mythology retelling / magical historical realism. It is about a 9-year-old girl named Pampa Campana who becomes the vessel of a goddess after witnessing her mother's death. The goddess tells Pampa Campana that she will be instrumental in constructing Bisnaga, which is a great city. It literally means Victory City. From that point on, Pampa Campana's life is interwoven with Bisnaga as the city changes hands over the centuries. So I DNF'd this book after 50 pages. Oops. I was just not interested at all in the story. The description made me think this was going to be told from the perspective of Pampa Campana. And to me, that was intriguing. You know, this kind of deified woman who lives like 200 years and whose entire story is woven into this city that is a part of her. I thought that would be super interesting, kind of like Cersei or Kaikei. But we only get about 15 to 20 pages of her POV before she, like, almost literally hands the POV over to these two somewhat random characters that I could not care less about. I'm sorry. I tried to stay invested. I tried. But once it became clear that these two were going to be the main event for the foreseeable future, at least, reading this book just became something that I dreaded. So I just noped out because I have better books to read and not enough time to waste on something I am not getting any joy from. I don't know if it's like, I don't know if you can rate books that you didn't finish. The first 50 pages I would give 2 stars. I was actually very glad that I DNF'd Victory City because next I read Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons by Quenby Wilson, which is an adult cozy fantasy that I adored. So this is about Miss Mildred Percy, who is a spinster, who spends her days taking care of her insufferable sister's children, until one day when she learns that her great uncle has left her an inheritance, which turns out to be a dragon egg. The egg hatches, and Miss Percy is suddenly thrust from being spinster and wallflower to dragon keeper and possible adventurer as she embarks on an adventure that she never thought she would have. Oh my gosh, this book is so cute. It combines the dry, humorous writing style of Terry Pratchett with the wholesomeness and whimsy of TJ Klune. This is definitely a new member of the cozy book list. It gave me all of the warm and fuzzies while also just having so much heart. It was everything I was hoping it would be. The writing was brilliant. There are so many excellent lines in this book that I had to jot down. But, well, there were actually too many for me to reasonably be able to jot all of them down, but I snagged a couple. Here is a taste of what they're like, of what this book is like. Mildred swallowed, and then in parenthesis, nervous people tend to do a great deal of swallowing at key moments, so this is simply a brief note from the author reminding you, the reader, of this fact, rather than leave you to exist under the misapprehension that I, the author, cannot think of another action to give my characters in order to show how difficult a time this is for them. I am quite sure they would rather swallow more than usual than give way to the ascending dread caused by having a bitey winged crocodile with chicken legs nestled in a basket only a few feet away from them. Thank you. Close parenthesis. I love this book. I gave it a full 5 out of 5 stars, and I just found out there's a sequel already out, so I'm very excited to read it. If you hear crunching noises, it's because my cat has decided this is the time to eat her lunch. Apologies. Next, I read The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. Whoa. Next, I read The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi, which is an adult gothic horror. This is about a married couple, both of whom are very into fairy tales and myths, and they just kind of are obsessed with stories about the other world, the fairy world. So when they get married, the wife, whose name is Indigo, makes her husband promise her to never ask about her past or never look into her past. Otherwise, she will disappear. They compare it to the myth of Eros and Psyche, where Eros tells Psyche he will visit her at night, but she can never look at him. And one day or one night, Psyche does turn to look at him, and he then disappears. So all is going well until they receive notice that Indigo's aunt is dying and they have to travel back to her childhood home, a house called the House of Dreams. When they arrive, the house draws them in and teases the husband about his wife's secrets, and fantasy blends with reality as he must decide whether these secrets are worth possibly destroying his marriage. I knew from the first paragraph that this was going to be good. If you love gothic horrors, if you loved the atmosphere of books like Mexican Gothic, if you love stories that blend reality with fantasy until you're not sure what's real and what isn't, then you will love this book. I was reading this at work and somebody saw the cover and said, "Oh, The Last Tale of the Flower Bride sounds spicy." I was like, no? Turns out they thought it was a romance novel based purely off of the title and cover. Which it is definitely not that. No, it is not. It is a gothic horror. It's weird. It's intriguing. It's almost mesmerizing. I had a great time reading it. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I finished in April was Under the Earth, Over the Sky by Emily McCosh, which is an adult high fantasy. So in the woods where the human world meets the fairy world, the fairy king Yomar, I hope I'm saying that right, finds an abandoned child. Knowing that leaving the child would mean its death, Yomar decides to take the child back to the fairy realm with him until a more suitable home can be found. This was everything. This book was everything. There's no straightforward plot to this book. It has major time jumps because that's just how time works in the fairy world. So there are like decades, occasionally there's like a decade-long time jump, but there is a mystery that sort of weaves it all together. But other than that mystery, there is no real plot. It's just a story about family and love and loss and grief and trauma, all just so beautifully told. I have never seen a parent-child relationship, especially a father-son relationship, that made me as emotional as this one did, purely because Yomar just loves his son. He adores him, and he's openly affectionate with him. Like, several times in the book, it'll say, like, Yomar kisses his little son on the forehead, and, like, he's always carrying him around, and he, like, proudly kind of shows him off to, you know, his citizens. And he just loves him so much. And just that, like, open affection from a father to a son, I don't think I've ever read that in a book before. And I've barely seen it portrayed in any sort of media. And I think it's actually really important to show that, because I think right now there's this sort of like weird stigma around fathers showing the same amount of affection towards their children as, say, like their mother would. And not only do I think that's stupid, I think that's actively harmful. Like, all parents should be affectionate towards their children. That's how you raise sane, competent adults, you know? But, you know, on top of Yomar's relationship with his son, there's just so many good relationships in this book. There's obviously the father-son relationship between Yomar and his son, but then Yomar also has another kind of father-son sort of relationship with his mentor, which is really nice. There's a lovely romance that focuses a lot more on their connection and, like, just how much they value each other rather than, like, passion. Like, let me be clear. There is zero spice in this book. And yet, I felt their connection. Like, I just love them. I love all of them. I love this book so much. It's so beautiful, it's ethereal, it's heartwarming, it's wholesome, and I lack the words. I'm just so happy with this book. So needless to say, I gave it a full 5 out of 5 stars. I really won this month. Other than Victory City, I mean, I didn't like adore Thistlefoot, but the last 3 books that I read in April were just couldn't stop winning on my end. Wow. I also picked back up To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. I am almost halfway through now. And yeah, I do really enjoy what's going on. It's just a lot. It's just a lot. There's just a lot. There are so many pages. And so much information. Oh goodness. I took a break and kind of forgot like a third of the characters. And I was like, oh no. Who is Nielsen? I remembered most of them, but some of them I'm still struggling to place. But yeah, it's a good reading month. And that's everything on the list for today. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you read in April down in the comments. My favorite book this month, it's really hard to pick between the last 3, but I think Under the Earth, Over the Sky I think that's one of my new favorite books, period. My least favorite was definitely Victory City. If you'd like to find me elsewhere, you can find me on Instagram as Leia Like the Princess, and you can also find my little embroidery and art store over there called Moonlit Cat Creations, or you can go directly to its website at moonlitcatcreations.com. And we are currently still raising funds for my Fringe show, which is going up in June. So if you would like to donate, I'll link the GoFundMe, and if you would just like to follow along on our progress and see what we're getting up to, I will also link its Instagram, Moonlit Cat Productions. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, stay cozy.